Their great concern is that Job agree with them. What they were saying is, if you simply recognized that you were getting what you deserved, if you got out of this syndrome of denial and admitted the truth, why then indeed you would be helped. And no matter what Job said, they kept responding in the same way, time and time again. And if you read the book, you find out that each time they speak, they get more direct and they become even meaner. You know, it's one thing to teach theology as a speculative study. I've taught theology. I used to teach theology at Moody Bible Institute and enjoyed it completely and wouldn't mind teaching theology again. But you know, it's so interesting. You're in a theology class and you're discussing issues such as whether or not babies go to heaven when they die. We wish that the Scripture were clearer. There are some hints that they do indeed go to heaven. We wish that the Bible would say more about that. And then in the class, there's an older couple who puts up a hand and says, you know, we had a son who was killed in an accident at the age of 5. Do you think that he is in heaven? Has he passed the age of accountability? And suddenly, the classroom is electrified and there's almost a silence that comes over the classroom because from now on, the discussion is no longer speculative. Now suddenly we are dealing with heart issues. Now suddenly we are talking about things that have caused grief and weeks and nights of tears. And now suddenly the discussion becomes very different. One day, and it must be 12 or 15 years ago, I was speaking at a conference and a man asked to see me later, and I still remember him. I think I would almost recognize him if I saw him after these years. He was standing outside under a tree. And I'll never forget his face. He had a son who had just committed suicide about 10 days before. And this Christian man, as he was spilling out all of his grief and all of his unanswered questions, said to me, really, he said, I have to say that if my son is not going to be in heaven, he said, I don't want to be in heaven either. He said, there's no way that I can be in heaven if my son is lost. And so we discussed whether or not A, his son had accepted Christ, and there was some question about that, but B, even if the answer is yes, what happens to someone who commits suicide who is a true believer? Now, the interesting thing is that these are the kinds of discussions that can take place theoretically very easily, but when you have a broken man who is weeping before God, who is crying out and who refuses comfort, suddenly they take on an entirely different character. And I said some things to him. I think I even said some wise things to him. But I don't think that he received them. Maybe I was like one of Job's friends who thought I had all the answers, when in point of fact it is very difficult sometimes to have a speculative theological answer to an emotional hurt. It's very difficult. Now, you know, there are some people who have very good intentions who, when someone gets sick, simply says to them, what you need to do is to confess your sin. You need to have enough faith. You need to seek God. And when you do, God will hear you and God will answer you. Now, to me, this discussion is not speculative, because there was a member of our own family who bought heavily into that theology, and when this individual was not healed at a particular point in time, went through days and days of depression, believing that God had forsaken her. You see, because if you accept that theology, that everybody is supposed to be healed all the time, all that they need to do is to have faith, and if they aren't healed, it's because of lack of faith, that can become cruel, diabolically cruel, and if you believe that, I suggest that you read the last part of the book of Job, because God was not happy that those three friends tried to pound that into Job's head. It isn't that simple. Sometimes when people become sick, there are those who send them books in the hospital, underlined at the appropriate places. Be sure to read this, and then those books are sent sometimes even anonymously, just saying, get with the program and you will be healed. What sin is it that you have committed that you have not dealt with? Number one, they talked without feeling. They had many nice things to say, but Job was the one who was hurting. It was an unfair discussion, very unfair. It's entirely different when that hot iron, that steak is in your own flesh. Well, this is Pastor Lutzer, and remember in Romans chapter 8 where the Apostle Paul says that all creation groans. And then he says, we also groan who have received the first fruits of the Spirit. You see, the Apostle Paul is saying there that because of the fallenness of this world, we do not receive all of the blessings that God has in store for us. Yes, of course, healing is in the atonement, but in order for us to experience all that Jesus Christ provided, we will have to die and be resurrected from the dead. Then, in our resurrected bodies, we will indeed enjoy God forever, and all the benefits will be ours. Meanwhile, we continue to suffer. Well, this is Pastor Lutzer encouraging you to suffer well, and tune in next time and you'll find out how.
Thank you, Dr. Lutzer. You've just heard Erwin Lutzer with part 2 of When Comfort is Discomfort, another message in his series, God, Why Me? Tomorrow, tune in for more on how not to be a friend. Running to Win comes to you from the Moody Church in Chicago. This 8-part series can be yours on CD as our thank you when you give a gift of any amount to support Running to Win. Just call us at 1-800-215-5001. That's 1-800-215-5001. Ask about God, Why Me? Online, go to offerrtw.com. That's offerrtw, all one word, .com. Or write to Running to Win at Box 11174, Chicago, Illinois, 60611. This is Dave McAllister. Tomorrow, more from the life of Job and his friends on our next Running to Win.